Okay, so hi, I'm Maya. I'm part of the sustainability group with Colton and Michaela. They've already talked about economic and social sustainability, and today I'm going to be talking about environmental sustainability. It's going to actually kind of tie into lecture today, so that'll be kind of interesting. So environmental sustainability doesn't really have one true definition. There's a lot of different ways to think about it, but really it's just our responsibility in interacting with the planet in a way that will not only help maintain current natural resources, but will also avoid harming the planet's ability to sustain future generations and meet their needs as well. So our population is currently growing at a really exponential rate. We also talked about this in lecture today. Our current population sits at about 7.9 billion people. And just in 2021 alone, the population has grown by about 21 million. So as you can see, just in 4 months, the population is growing really, really quickly. But regardless of population size and its rate, Earth is still a finite resource, and the carrying capacity is really unknown. We're not really sure how long Earth will be able to sustain life at the way we are currently consuming and our current actions. Something I thought was really interesting was that the average middle-class American consumes 3.3 times the substance level of food and about 250 times the level of clean water. If everyone globally were to consume and act in the same way as your typical average middle-class American, the planet would only be able to sustain about 2 billion people. So I think that really puts into perspective how high our consuming rates are and how we really need to start considering how our actions are going to be affecting Earth's ability to sustain future generations. So with this issue of a growing population, we also have a growing challenge of providing enough food and resources for these people. Just like we talked about today, as population increases, demand will also increase. And agriculture is actually a leading source of pollution, land degradation, and resource depletion, as both Haley and Katrina have talked about today. So some overall goals for achieving agriculturally sustainable practices include achieving and maintaining healthy soil characteristics, managing your water use wisely, minimizing any possible air, water, and climate pollution, and overall promoting biodiversity. So some big picture effects that agriculture has on the environment, the first being soil erosion. So this loss of surface soil can be due to anything from wind to overwatering to tilling of the soil, and it lowers soil productivity due to the main top layer of soil is the majority of nutrient source for plants, and it also helps the soil hold water. So plants that are growing in soil that have really been affected by soil erosion have a harder time growing and growing at a healthy rate because they have less nutrients and water available. Additionally, eroded soil can end up in waterways, which can lead to flooding, habitat destruction, and chemical contamination if any of the soil has been treated with pesticides, or herbicides, or chemicals of that form. It takes about 300 years for just 1 inch of topsoil to form. I think that really shows how detrimental our actions are for the future. Just by destroying 1 inch of topsoil, it will take about 300 years for the planet to replenish that naturally. In terms of deforestation, agriculture accounts for about 80%, which is a really large percentage. And the main reason is because agricultural practices often leave land degraded. This can be due to soil erosion, overwatering, nutrient depletion, and water loss, drought, anything like that. And it leads to a migration to other areas that have really rich soil or resources that farmers may think would benefit the growth of their crops. But this turns into a really vicious cycle of land being degraded and then migration to healthier areas and that land being degraded as well, and so on and so on. In terms of climate change, we know that carbon emissions are a really large contributor to climate change, and agriculture accounts for about 1/3 of total carbon emissions. This is another really large percentage and something to keep in mind. That overall it's affecting ecological stability of the planet and the environment's ability to allow us to grow food and provide for both our current populations and future populations as well. Some examples of unsustainable agricultural practices. So the first, we have tilling of soil, as you can see in the picture below. This is done because it increases nutrient availability and prevents weed growth. However, it's loosening the soil, which leads to really high rates of soil erosion and lowers overall soil productivity. We also have monocultures. This is done because standard cultivation, maintenance, and harvesting practices are often a lot easier for both the labor force in agriculture as well as economically. You're not trying to provide different forms of equipment or different labor sources to grow different kinds of plants. It's all under one kind of main branch. However, monocultures have a really high susceptibility to disease, pests, drought, and nutrient depletion, so this can lead to an overall mass crop failure, as well as really high chemical usage due to that prevalence of disease and pests. And then chemical usage, This can be anything from pesticides, herbicides, anything like that. They can lead to eutrophication, which are dead zones. So this is often a really high depletion in soil productivity and overall ecosystem health. And also this runoff into water sources decreases oxygen availability in the water, which can lead to major species loss and overall habitat destruction of these marine sources. And then, like Katrina talked about today, the humans' contact with chemicals can lead to a variety of issues, anywhere from reproductive issues to cancer to immune suppression to lowered intelligence as well. So in contrast, some sustainable agricultural practices. First, we have crop rotation. This can be done through multi-year crop rotations or intercropping, and it improves the health and productivity of the soil as well as aiding in pest control. So this is sort of an opposite to monocultures that I discussed before. And then we have integrating livestock and plants. So the current form of industrial farming really separates plants and animals. This is mainly to achieve the greatest possible economic profit. It's typically big industries. However, it keeps plants away from natural fertilizers and animals away from natural food sources. So integrating these together really can create more profitable and abundant farms. And then additionally, planting cover crops. These are planted during the off season, so typically after a harvest. They are able to protect and build soil health by preventing erosion. They also replenish nutrients, and they reduce weed growth, which typically reduces the need for any chemical additions to the soil or to the plants later down the road. So as you can see, the really big key theme here through sustainable agricultural practices is diversification and trying to maintain nature's integrity, and allow plants and animals to kind of coexist a little bit more and grow with each other throughout their process. Okay, so we've talked a lot about big picture agriculture things, and how this affects the environment, but also I think it's really important to remember what you can do at a more individual and local level. Sometimes that can feel a lot more empowering. So first, buying from local grocers is something that has a really positive result. Not only are you supporting farmers who may be practicing these more sustainable methods, but you also are reducing any form of transportation emissions from the food. And as we've talked about before, eating less meat, obviously we know that the meat industry has a really negative impact on the environment. So doing your best to reduce your meat intake can also help with this. And then using efficient energy sources. This can be anywhere from ensuring that your appliances are updated, turning off light bulbs when you go into a room, that kind of thing. It reduces your overall carbon footprint, which reduces carbon emissions, which is also beneficial. And then trying to use eco-friendly cleaning products and clothes. This also sort of ties in with really trying to support companies and businesses that are following sustainable practices to sort of reroute the way that society consumes things. Also, using eco-friendly cleaning products reduces any form of negative aerosols or anything like that being put out into the atmosphere. And then recycling and reusing, this is something we've always been told, trying to not use disposable water bottles as much, maybe reusing those more, or reusing any plastic bags that you get when you're at the grocery store. I feel that reuse is a little bit more beneficial than recycling. A lot of our current recycling habits are not quite as efficient as they could be, so really trying to reuse and being conscious of what you're consuming is something that really can benefit. Reducing your transportation. Most people, their highest carbon footprint percentage is their transportation use. So that's typically cars or planes. So trying to walk more or carpool or ride your bike can really aid in this. And then finally, meal planning. So this can not only aid you in buying from local grocers, it also reduces any waste of food and really ensures that you're trying to be as efficient as possible. Overall, just really trying to educate yourself and stay up to date with what practices are, really efficient and sustainable and ways that you can help the environment is a really great step. You also can start to hold, decision makers and local policymakers accountable if you are aware of practices that may be unsustainable or harmful to the environment.